Hi everyone, today we will be talking about utilitarianism and an introduction to the moral theories of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Before starting, please subscribe my channel, and if you like, please click the like button. At first, when we look at the historical background, we see that the years 1748, 18th century were full of change. We see scientific advancements, revolutions, colonization, social and religious reform, industrialization, and also new modes of transportation. These changes also affected the ideas of the philosophers. So, at first, when we look at a brief biography of the Jeremy Bentham, we can say that he was born in London. He was a child prodigy, read as a young toddler, and studied Latin at the age of 3. Also, he studied law at Queen's College, and instead of practicing law, he spent his life looking for and writing about ways in which existing laws could be improved. And when we look at the brief biography of the John Stuart Mill, he was also born in London. He was the son of James Mill, who is also a philosopher, economist, and also East India Company official. Mill was educated by his father and Jeremy Bentham, and suffered a nervous breakdown at 20 and credited his recovery to poetry. And he was also an East India Company officer and a Liberal Member of Parliament for Westminster. After these brief biographies of the two philosophers, we can talk about our ethical judgments. Ethical philosophy differs from the sciences because it's normative or prescriptive rather than descriptive. In other words, ethics tells us how we ought to act or what we should do, while the sciences are more likely to observe how things are in nature or society. There are 3 areas of emphasis in making moral judgments. First, purpose or motive. Second, act, rule or maxim. Third, results or consequences. Making ethical judgments in utilitarianism, they say that utilitarianism says that the result or the consequence of an act is the real measure of whether it is good or bad. This utilitarianist theory emphasizes ends over means. Theories like this one that emphasize the results or consequences are called teleological or consequentialist. At first, when we look at Bentham's formulation of utilitarianism, he says that man is under 2 great masters, pain and pleasure. The great good that we should seek is happiness, he says that. And as you see, it's a hedonistic perspective. Those actions whose results increase happiness or diminish pain are good. They have utility. And when we look at the Bentham's hedonistic calculus, according to him, in determining the quantity of happiness that might be produced by an action, we evaluate the possible consequences by applying several values, such as intensity, duration, certainty or uncertainty, purity, etc. There are four theses of utilitarianism. First, consequentialism. It says that the rightness of actions is determined solely by their consequences. Second, hedonism. Utility is the degree to which an act produces pleasure. Hedonism is the thesis that pleasure or happiness is the good that we seek and that we should seek. Thirdly, maximalism. A right action produces the greatest good, consequences, and least bad. The fourth thesis is universalism. The consequences to be considered are those of everyone affected and everyone equally. And at this point, there are two formulations of utilitarian theory. First, the principle of utility. Second, the greatest good, happiness. In the principle of utility, the best action is that which produces the greatest happiness and or reduces pain. Second, in the greatest happiness, we ought to do that which produces the greatest happiness and the least pain for the greatest number of people. We can talk about two types of utilitarianism. First one is act, second one is rule. Act type of utilitarianism formulated by Jeremy Bentham, and rule type of utilitarianism formulated by Mill. Act type of utilitarianism says that an action is right if and only if it produces the greatest balance of pleasure over pain for the greatest number. Rule type of utilitarianism says that an action is right if and only if it conforms to a set of rules, the general acceptance of which will produce the greatest balance of pleasure over pain for the greatest number. So, when we look at the application of this utilitarian theory, A, you attempt to help an elderly man across the street, he gets across safely. Conclusion, then we can conclude that the act was a good act. B, you attempt to help an elderly man across the street, you stumble as you go, he is knocked into the path of a car and is hurt. The conclusion is that the act was a bad act. Also, if you can use 80 soldiers as a decoy in war and thereby attack an enemy force and kill several hundred enemy soldiers, that is morally good choice, even though the 80 might be lost. Also, another example, if lying or stealing will actually bring about more happiness and or reduce pain, act utilitarianism says we should lie and steal in those cases. Now we are going to talk about the criticisms of Bentham's theory. Bentham's theory could mean that if 10 people would be happy watching a man being eaten by wild dogs, it will be a morally good thing for the 10 men to kidnap someone and throw the man into a cage of wild, hungry dogs. You see? Now, John Stuart Mill's adjustments to utilitarianism, we will talk about now. Mill argues that we must consider the quality of the happiness, not just the quantity. For example, he talks about higher and lower pleasures. For instance, some might find happiness with a pitcher of beer and a pizza. Others may find happiness watching a fine Shakespearean play. The quality of happiness is greater with the later one. Mill says that in his book, it is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it is because they only know their own side of the question. The other party to the comparison knows both sides. And he continues, as between his own happiness and that of others, utilitarianism requires him to be as strictly impartial as a disinterested and benevolent spectator. In the golden rule of Jesus of Nazareth, we read the complete spirit of the ethics of utility: to do as you will be done by, and to love your neighbor as yourself, constitute the ideal perfection of utilitarian morality. Also, we see criticisms of utilitarianism. If I am to bring the greatest happiness to the greatest number, not putting my own happiness above others, that might lead to a dilemma. I live in a neighborhood where 90% of my neighbors are using drugs. I could make them most happy by helping supply them with cheap drugs, right? But I feel uncomfortable doing that. What should a utilitarian do in this case? Also, Bernard Williams criticized the implied doctrine of negative responsibility in utilitarianism. For example, a thug or a thief breaks into my home and holds 8 people hostage, telling us he will kill all of us. However, the thief says, if you will kill 2 or 3 of your family members, I will let you and the others 3 live. So, with utilitarianism, the good thing to do in this case is to kill 3 or 4 members of your family. So, Utilitarianism plays fast and loose with God's commandments. If lying, stealing, or killing could lead to an increase of happiness, for the greatest number, we are told we should lie, steal, or kill. Isn't that a rejection of God's commandments? To conclude, in this video, we just talk about an introduction in the theories of Mill's and Jerome Bentham's ideas. We will give a brief ideas of their great books. Please don't forget to subscribe. See you